it's Mrs. Spear again. Have you been working on your story about a time when the day or the nighttime sky is important? We're finding out it's a lot of work and time to plan and organize a story, aren't we? Hopefully, you're at least jotting down some ideas, doing some thinking about what you might write about. You might even start to do some drawing. It's okay if you want to draw the pictures out to your story first and then add words later. Don't forget, you can always rewatch this episode when you're ready to do some writing. We have a few things we're going to do today. The first thing is, I wrote some new parts to my story that I'll be sharing with you, and that will wrap up the beginning of my story. Then, I'm going to be doing some revising with you. We'll think and talk about what revising is and practice some of that today. Finally, we're going to continue to use our story map so that we can continue on and write the middle of the story. Are you ready? Let's go. Grab some paper and a pencil if you don't have it. So now let's look at what I added to my story. I added both words and illustrations. Illustrations are what we draw. They match our story. I added this illustration because I had just written about putting on goggles and sunscreen. So in this picture, you'll see us putting sunscreen on the kids and grabbing their goggles. When you're writing your story, make a picture that highlights what you want to show when readers are looking at your story. Let's reread the story from the beginning, and then we'll read the part that I added on. It was a hot summer afternoon at our family's favorite beach in town. We grabbed all our things and headed to the beach. It was hard to lug it all. We looked for a spot on the crowded beach. It was time to find goggles, put on sunscreen, and head down to the cold water. That's the part you've already seen that we wrote together. Now I'm going to read that next part that's going to finish up this green part here. That's the beginning of my story. We all went into the water, wading out. The kids jumped and went under. They came up fast. We laughed seeing their faces. Then Matt went out for a swim. The kids and I looked at shiny rocks. They wanted to go out by Matt, so I had to go under. It was cold. We swam and played Red Rover. What a great time we were having. Remember, we're using our story map where I had all these ideas written about sunscreen and goggles, heading to water and laughing and playing, wading out, and playing Red Rover. And I made sure I added those into the beginning of my story. So now, let's talk about revising. Writers have to read their work over and over again. When you're writing, if you're working to make your work more clear, or better organized, or more interesting, you are revising. Can you say revising? Great job. When you're revising, you might add details in, change a word, change some sentences, or you might decide you need to take some details out or take some sentences out. Either way, when we are revising, we're trying to make our work really clear so the audience can read it, enjoy it, and understand it. My audience is you and Miss Rogers. Remember, she's going to read and give me some feedback, and then I'll do even more revising later. I'm going to show you a spot where I read and thought, that's a little bit confusing. I'd like to add some details to my story. The part that I thought about adding to my story was when we got to the part where we're thinking about grabbing our things. So it says here, We grabbed all our things and headed to the beach. I thought it might make it more clear. Where are we grabbing our things from? I didn't tell you. So I thought about adding the words from the car. We grabbed all our things right here from the car and headed to the beach. So I'm going to put something called a carrot, not like the carrot you chew and eat from the garden. This carrot is spelled differently and it means something totally different. It's something you put in when you're adding. So what I'm going to do is put a little, like, it looks like the root part of the carrot, right? I put this little upside down beginning of a triangle, and I'm going to write, again, we grabbed all our things from the car. From the car. And it's okay if it looks a little bit messy because this is not my final version of the story. We grabbed all our things from the car and headed to the beach. I feel that's more clear. Do you feel that's more clear to you as the person who's listening? I sure hope so. The other part I thought would be helpful to fix is this part here. We looked for a spot on the crowded beach, but then all of a sudden it says it was time to find goggles. I feel like I need a little bit more information there. We looked for a spot. Well, what happened? Finally, we found it. I thought it would be helpful to put that here. Finally, we found it. I'm going to add that sentence right now. It's the beginning of a sentence, so I'm going to use an uppercase F. Finally, comma, we, finger space. You don't want to forget to do your finger spaces with your words. Found it. And I'm kind of excited about it, so I could just put a period to stop. Do you know what I put when you're kind of like excited about something at the end of a sentence? Yes, an exclamation point. Finally, we found it. Yes. So now you've seen me add two things into my story, so hopefully it's more clear to you. Let's read it from the top. It was a hot summer afternoon at our family's favorite beach in town. We grabbed all our things from the car and headed to the beach. It was hard to lug it all. We looked for a spot on the crowded beach. Finally, we found it. It was time to find goggles, put on sunscreen, and head down to the cold water. I'm feeling like my work is more clear because I revised it. You try some revising in your story.
This program is made possible in part by the Michigan Department of Education, the State of Michigan, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Additional support by viewers like you. Thank you.